You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Welcome, everybody, to, I guess it's episode 66 of Only Human. I'm Tony. Like always, I'll be your host today. And today we've got a special guest with us, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But for those of you watching for the first time, our podcast is about individuals, how they fit in, how they grow, how they get better with the resources at hand. We take a lot of weird turns left and right. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what a lot of people are talking a lot about, and that is generational differences. And I've got a guest that I'd like to bring in just a second. Brandon, I met here just a couple of weeks ago at an event I was doing in Memphis. We'll learn a little bit more about his story. And we're going to toss back and forth a few ideas about, even the very question, is there a significant difference between generations? It sure seems like it if you're looking on the internet or reading any of the books, many books that have been written about it. But here's the one thing I do know. I know that that in aviation, as well as many other industries, we are going through the largest generational handoff in history. And a lot of it's because people like me, baby boomers, are aging out of the fight. And there's a lot of questions whether that's a good thing, if there are pearls of wisdom, how do we actually move that into the next generations? Or is it better off letting us ride off into the sunset and take our old school ideas with us? So with that, I want to bring in Brandon. Brandon, welcome to Only Human. It's great to see you here. And we had a little bit of a chance to chat at the FedEx Safety Smackdown a couple of weeks ago. And I just want an opportunity to bring you on the podcast, talk to you about some of these ideas. But before we go too much further, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience here? Tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, and maybe even where you came from. So I'll just toss it over to you.
Yes, sir. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on here. I think it's very important for people to get together and have these sorts of conversations. I think that's where a real progression is made. A little bit about myself. My name is Brandon Carroll. I'm from Pickwick, Tennessee. I go to the University of Memphis. I'm in their commercial aviation professional pilot program. I'm currently about to start my commercial training. I've got roughly 100 hours, just under 100 hours, but I am private pilot rated and instrument rated. And then outside of school, I run the MSAA. I co-founded the Memphis Student Aviation Association. I'm involved with the Veteran Student Organization, the Baptist College Ministry. So I try to do a lot of extracurricular activities outside of just education. And then I'm also an intern for the University Aviation Association, which is where I've gained a lot of insight from individuals such as yourself.
Well, thanks for that. As I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, I also noticed something you didn't mention there, that you're a combat engineer in the Tennessee Air National Guard. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I've been in the Tennessee Army National Guard for 5 years in February 27th.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, with everything that's going on in eastern Tennessee right now, you may well get called on to go help build some bridges or fix some of that damage from the hurricane that went through. But thank you. Go ahead.
You said that. I actually did get called upon last October. I got put on orders for – the orders didn't have an end date. They ended up ending about 40 days. We were over there in the East Tennessee area doing route clearance, obstruction clearance, and trying to help restore some normalcy back to the Tennessee community.
Yeah, it must have been awful. Tell me what you saw there. What was it like?
It was very bad. I haven't personally seen that level of destruction in our home states ever. Just absolute houses completely washed away. We found a car. We were up in East Tennessee. We found a car from North Carolina, like North Carolina registration plates. It traveled that much. The area was completely unprepared for a flood. It hadn't flooded in that area in over 200 years. So it was just absolute destruction. But what I will say is there was a very good community response to our presence. They were very happy to see us. Everybody was waving flags, blowing horns, a lot of smiling faces, a lot of kids wanting us to blow our horns. So it was awesome to get to interact with the community that way and just serve fellow citizens. In a combat role, it's not something you get to do a lot. Your main job is on the other end of the spectrum, but it's awesome to be able to get to do that job too.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, on another podcast, we'll talk about the difference between planning and preparation. I'll briefly hit it now. Planning, when people plan for things like natural disasters or something like that, you are sort of assuming some things will remain orderly. Preparation is different. You assume everything's going to go to hell, and you've got all these things, right? And, one thing I know about folks from Tennessee, and I used to do a lot of bow hunting down there and got to know a lot of good people down there. They're firm believers in preparation. And, but how do you prepare for something that hasn't happened in 200 years? And it's just catastrophic. I think it's going to be a while before things get back to true normal for those folks. And God bless you and them for doing it. Well, let's jump over into some of this stuff about generational differences. And we can stick with aviation, but we don't necessarily have to. First of all, tell me a little bit about why you and I think your other co-founder was Cade. Is that his name?
Yes, sir.
Founded this, what's it called? Memphis Student Aviation Association. Tell me a little bit about what that's all about, because it's entirely run by, I guess we call you guys Gen Zers. Is that right? Or are you younger?
Yeah, I fall in the category of Gen Z, unfortunately, but yeah. I was raised by an older generation. My grandparents did most of my raising, so I feel more like a millennial, but I fall in the category of Gen Z. But yeah, so the MSA was something me and my friend Cade co-founded here at the university. We're both first-generation college students, and we're both first-generation pilots. And one thing we noticed is that we had a significant disadvantage as far as industry knowledge and then industry connections. So we wanted to create a organization that would bridge the gap between industry professionals, industry opportunities, industry education, and then our students here at the university who may fall in the same category as us, who don't have the dad who's a captain at FedEx, who hasn't been around aviation their whole life. We wanted to bridge that gap so people could start learning about different aspects of aviation. When people think of aviation, they think of either Top Gun or FedEx or Delta. But there's so many different other aspects of aviation that are necessary, and we wanted to bridge that gap. So, for example, here February 10th, we're going on a tour of the Memphis International Tower, Air Traffic Control Tower, and the TRACON facilities. And that's just an event to help get our students to understand the different things that are going on outside of the airplane that are going on to the success of the flight. I think it's very valuable for people to understand who they're talking to and what the person that they're talking to has going on around them and under their operations. And also, there may be somebody that just falls in love with the air traffic control environment and wants that job. So that's a very, very important job in the aviation industry. And I think a lot of those jobs are overlooked and especially misunderstood on what all they have going on. So I think we'll become better pilots and the industry will be better if younger kids are getting exposed to these types of information and education opportunities. So that's why we created it.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And you're right. I came in I didn't know anything about piloting. I'd never been in an aircraft until Ronald Reagan said, if you got two hands, a head and a heartbeat, you can fly jets for the Air Force. And I met those minimum qualifications. But here's the thing that I've learned over a while, flying airplanes and working in the industry. An airplane and a pilot is invisibly tethered to thousands of things you've never dreamed of. Software engineers, wind tunnel tests. Andrew used to fuel and work on airplanes in the Air Force. Not just mechanics, air traffic controllers, managers, schedulers. Even the further you get into it, the kind of de-icers they use on the parking areas versus where the airplanes can go. And all of these things are sciences in their own right, but they all come together in this industry. And the more you do things like get out and do these, like field trip sounds awesome, but you can do a field trip every day of your life, man. When you get off the airplane, you see somebody walking around on the ramp, you know they got a badge and they work there. Talk to them, right? Find out what it is that you do, and you're gonna discover, I never knew that, right? I had no idea that was being done, or this inspection was required, or whatever. Back to MSAA, I think I got an idea for you guys. I think you need to take this national. There's all kinds of folks, Embry Riddle, Purdue, North Dakota State, Daniel Webster. I don't know if Daniel Webster is still around, but there's many, many, many aviation colleges. And I think there's a lot more people like you than you think there are. I run into people every day that say, everybody that used to come into aircraft maintenance, for example, always worked on cars or motorcycles before they came in. Not anymore. People are coming in off the street, and all they've done is play video games or whatever. And so we have some assumptions about people coming into aviation that we shouldn't make. I'll give you a classic example for me. I told you I'd never been in an airplane to go anywhere for any reason until I was at the controls. And the first time I went up and flew was at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma, and they had 3 parallel runways, 1735, left, center, and right. Okay? And so I had gone through all the ground training. I had studied the charts and all of that stuff. And I got airborne, and I asked my instructor, where are the other 3 runways? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, there's 17 left, center, right, 35 left, center, right. I had no idea that they were the same. 1735 was the same runway, just going different directions. And he looked at me like, you got to be kidding me. And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, what else don't you know? I go, well, you're going to find that out, because I can't even tell you. I can't tell you how stupid I am about this industry, because this is brand new to me. So I have a lot of empathy for those folks. And I think what you have done there, certainly there's an opportunity to go national with it. But anyways, I digress. Let me ask you a couple of questions. What is it, since you're a first generation aviator, what brought you into aviation? What appeals to you about it?
So it's kind of a twofold answer. So at first, I spent a lot of time with my uncle, and he lives in a nice area on a golf course. And he had this neighbor who was a FedEx pilot, and the guy never went to work. He made a lot of money, and I would talk to him about all the places he's been. Right. And like when I say he never went to work, obviously he did. But like from my little kid perspective, the guy never worked. Like he would be out every morning running with his dog. And it's like, what do you do for a living? And he had a nicer house than my uncle and everything like that. So I got an interest in the lifestyle of being a pilot at a very young age, just through that experience. Now, my passion for aviation did not come much later. I'd actually kind of forgot about being a pilot, and I decided to go the criminal justice route. I was a freshman in high school. I needed some volunteers for the National Honor Society, and one of my options was to volunteer at my local fly-in at my local airport. So I did volunteer for that, and they had an air show. They had old World War II planes, and as you know, I'm a military guy, very interested in American history and military history, and I got to go up in one of those old World War II airplanes. And he took me up in there, and then he just starts doing the craziest maneuvers I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, I've never seen the ground from above upside down until this point. And this was my first time in an airplane at any level, commercial or general aviation. And then I got to hear him talk about his old stories, and I just fell in love with it. I was like, wow, you can get paid to do this. Like you can go up every day and this is your office cubicle, and from then I decided to volunteer at my airport more often. I eventually got hired just for groundskeeping, weed eating, little maintenance, changing out taxi lights, checking fuel, little small things that you would do at a public airport that's very small. But through that, I got to talk to pilots, and I got to spend a little bit of time in the cockpit of an airplane through different people, just nagging at people. Hey, man, you going up today? You're going to get your currency. It's like, well, let me ride with you, right? And different things like that, trying to get in the seat of a plane anytime I could. And I actually still work there to this day. It's a seasonal job. During the summer, school breaks, I still work at my local airport. But that's where the passion came from.
Yeah. So back to the lifestyle, there's something I may have shared with you when we talked a couple of weeks ago, but I have a lot of airline friends, and one of them said, being an airline pilot is the best part-time job a golfer could ever have. And so, there is something about that. I will share with you though that it's two things I think are important that I've certainly grown to recognize about our industry. One is that you can fly airplanes for as long as you want to. At some point, you'll get bored with it. Okay? After every airplane, I've flown 5 different types of airplane. After every one, at about 750 hours, I said, is this all there is, man? Right? And that's a really dangerous point, because then you start saying things like, I told you I was a B-1 pilot. I wonder if I can air refuel with 2 engines at idle. And then I wonder if I can stay completely at the outer lower right limit on this formation. And what would those references look like? You begin to make stuff up, right? To keep yourself interested, which is important. That's the one thing. You'll eventually get bored with it. And when you begin to get bored with it, all the politics, and you start listening to the negative sides of things. And that's why you can go on just about any airline pilot blog in the world, and they're always complaining. It's just part of our culture to complain about management, about scheduling, about upgrades, about contracts, whatever it is. So be aware of that. Don't let it blindside you and knock you off your passionate approach to this. The second thing, far more important for your generation, is right now it's all roses and it's a yellow brick road, man. We need pilots really, really bad. We also need maintainers and air traffic controllers and every part of our industry. And so salaries are going up, job opportunities are everywhere. Aviation is a very cyclical industry. 9/11, half the airline pilots in America and the world were furloughed, right? Maybe half is a little bit more than it was, but many, many, many. The recession, right? COVID. Before that, there was a fuel price problem back in the Jimmy Carter years. And each and every time that happens, people that thought that they had a career suddenly were out, right? Mm-hmm. And they probably will hire you back when things get better. Every time there's a massive furlough, a relatively large number of people never come back into the industry because they have to make a living somehow. So they become insurance agents, or they buy a pizza parlor, or they do what they have to do. And so one of the little pearls of wisdom I tell everybody, and my son right now is just finishing up training for UPS. He just got out of the Air Force, C-17 guy. I said, have a backup plan for when that happens to you. Back to East Tennessee, right? There's a difference between planning and preparing. If you have a backup plan, you are actually preparing for that next big downturn in our industry. And right now, no one can see it, right? But you never can, right? It's war related, or it's economically related, or it's pandemic related, or something, right? So you'll go through a couple of those if you make aviation your career, like it sounds like you want to. And I think the other thing about the passion is I see so many people that meet the standards and get the job and get the type rating, and they just don't work on the passion, right? They don't find a protege. They don't find a mentor. They don't keep improving their skills because it's so easy. And flying sophisticated airplanes is easy. Even unsophisticated airplanes is easy. Even ones, I used to fly at night in the mountains at 400 feet and 600 miles per hour. in a formation type environment with having to drop little bombs and on key targets and avoid things. That got boring. How in the world did that get boring? It got so boring. There were times on training flights when we were doing that and pilots would fall asleep. Okay? At 600 miles an hour, 400 feet at night in the mountains with MVGs on and all that other stuff. So no matter what it is, you get good enough to where that passion will begin to reduce, and you can never, then I'll get off my high horse and give you another question, but you can never settle for good enough. If you're always pushing your limit, inside the lines of the airplane's limits and the regulatory limits, of course, you'll stay passionate about this, about flying airplanes, right? There is one other, I said I was going to stop, but there's one other thing to consider, and that is as you move forward in any career, you will get opportunities to stay in the cockpit or go into some form of management. And in the military, you really have no choice. They're going to pull you out. You're going to become an instructor and then an evaluator, and then they're going to give you people to supervise, and then you got to write performance reports and all sorts of things. The same thing happens in aviation, no matter what type of aviation that you're in. As you progress, they need people to manage those programs, and they want people with air under their butts that have some experience in order to be able to do that. So those opportunities come and go, and some people don't jump right into them. Some people don't want to do that. But that's a choice you can be thinking about along the way. Okay, let's get into some of the generational things that are, I think, stereotypes. And I'm a big fan of stereotypes, even though you're not supposed to do it, because they're all based in some reality, right? And so what is it about you guys that makes it seem like all you do is text each other, play video games, and in point of fact, you don't seem this way, but have trouble communicating across generational lines? Do you see that in your generation? Have you experienced it from your side, but also have you experienced people dismissing you because of your lack of experience or stereotype Gen Zers? They're good with automation, but they don't want to do the hard work. What have you seen that you could share with the group?
Yeah, so I've absolutely seen the problems with technology and communication. So, for instance, I think we spoke about this a little bit last week, but my generation would rather look at their phone, order food off an app, have that food delivered to their door, have that person not even knock on the door, and then just pick their food up and eat it, rather than to go to the grocery store, buy groceries, come home, cook as a family, and then eat the meal that you cooked, and then clean up as a family. And I understand that busy schedules play into that. You know, it's easier to stop at McDonald's than it is to go to the grocery store, go cook, and then clean. Time plays a role into that. But it tells you a lot. I think that the main problem is that it's how we grew up. You know, I did not grow up in a world that didn't have telecommunications. I didn't grow up in a world that didn't have internet. I didn't grow up in a world that didn't have music in your car when you drove, you know. And then even when we would take long trips, we had movie players that would sit on the back of the seats, and we would sit and watch movies. And I think that the constant desire, and I think it plays a little bit on y'all's shoulders, of your generation and the prior generation, y'all's constant desire to distract us has killed our attention spans to have deep and critical thoughts and conversations without responding to something. So, like, I see a lot that my generation is very responsive. We see something, we respond. We see something, we respond. We see something, we respond. But we were not very creative in the aspect of taking something that doesn't exist and creating it as existence. You don't see that a lot in my generation, because everything that we do is all catered to responding to something we saw online, responding to what so-and-so said, responding to the notification I just got on my phone. And it's such a responsive culture that there's not a whole lot of production coming from our minds. And I think as young kids, that's where a lot of that's developed. There's no limitations on your thoughts as a child, especially not in America, because you don't have circumstances that are like making you grow up faster than you're supposed to in most cases on a general level. But with us, it's like all the time that I was supposed to be imagining this stick into a gun and playing cowboys and Indians as a kid, I was spending watching a tablet. And I think that's where it started. And I think we're just now, because my generation's the first generation that is coming of age and coming into roles that are vital and important to normal society, that we're just now starting to see the implications of that. But like I said, I do think that some of it is the parenting, and then some of it is just the advancement of technology. And then COVID played a big part with shutting the world down. People got comfortable not socializing, because socializing with people can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary to be uncomfortable in a lot of circumstances. And it's a necessary uncomfortability that develops you in a positive way. And it's something that it's a way that we haven't been developed personally.
Yeah. So I want to follow up on two things there. Where were you in your life, not geographically, but in high school, college, or whatever, when they closed the high schools?
So I was actually a senior in high school. It was March. It was like the first week of March. They canceled school on Monday, said we'd come back Tuesday, canceled school on Tuesday, said we'd come back Wednesday, canceled school for the rest of the week, and then we never went back. I was in the second semester of my senior year. I ended up missing out on prom. We have a senior skip day that we do. It's a tradition at my high school. I ended up missing on that. We had a little senior prank planned. We were just going to barbecue on the football field one morning and put up tents and hike out there, but we missed that. We were supposed to have a senior breakfast. We missed that. So all these big, large events where you would socialize with people outside of your normal clique or social group, we missed those events. We didn't have those my second semester of my senior year.
Yeah, so you were kind of lucky that you only had it for 6 months or 3 months or whatever. I mean, there are folks out there that didn't get any of that for like two full years, and those are formative things. Those are things that you'll remember. It's kind of like boot camp. Everybody remembers who they're with and what boot camp was. And you and I could meet somewhere, and we'd have common ground to talk about, and somewhere to go and launch a discussion. So that's point one. Point two, I think, and this plays into aviation in a big way, is I do believe that we've really suffered in aviation over the past 25 years due to I guess I'll call it the attention economy. But really, it's in my early days of flying, when you landed, you had an hour at least where you talked about it, right? We used to have a beer machine in the squadron. You put $1 in, you pull a beer out, you pop it, and you'd sit there and you'd go over every aspect of the flight. And then when you finish, then you start talking about, the Lions going to beat the Packers this week, and you socialize. The spouses socialized. There was a culture that connected people and families together in aviation. And I watched that slowly die in the military, and then I watched it die everywhere. And you ask your typical business aviation guy or commercial aviation guy, airline aviation guy or gal, and when you land, it's basically how fast can we get out of here and get back to our normal lives. And I think there's a problem with that because you don't make the connections. But furthermore, I think there is a real impact on crew coordination when people are basically isolationists. They've trained themselves to order DoorDash, have it dropped at the door, and open it up. Thanks. Close the door quickly. Eat your food. Get back on your cell phone. And the attention economy. It's not just technology. It's the brilliant minds that are dumbing us down, and making us into tribes. Right? Team Vampire, Team Werewolf, Trump, Biden, whatever. You could fire people up and keep them engaged, and that's money to them. Every moment that we're staring at a screen, they're taking it to the bank. So they're really good at it, and we have to realize that when you're flying an airplane, just making the required call-outs doesn't get it when you're talking about high performing under stress. You've got to know that person. You've got to know what they're feeling. You got to know what you can expect from them. They've got to have the same feeling about you. And if you're not used to reading people, if you're not used to doing that stuff, it doesn't magically occur. So I have a big fear that going forward, we're going to see more crew coordination errors and accidents and things that, Sully and his co-pilot did seamlessly under high stress when the geese flew in their engine. They landed on the so-called Miracle on the Hudson, which I'm going to tell you, 80% of pilots out there could have made that landing on the Hudson. However, not many could have made the decision to do it. That required some real, hey, what do you think? I think this. You agree? Okay, we're going this way. So that's the kind of thing that I think we really need to be careful that we don't lose, right? So, yeah, fascinating stuff here. We got a couple more minutes, and I just want to wrap this up by asking you kind of a last question. If you could ask for anything out of the industry right now, people that are senior to you, and whether they've been in 10 years, 15 years, or 35 years like me, what would you like to know? What would you like previous generations or organizations to provide to your generation to make sure that that you're fully prepared to handle not only a career-long obligation, but those crisis moments?
Absolutely. That's a wonderful question. I think it's kind of a twofold answer. First, tell me your secrets, right? And I'll give you a short story for this example. So on my I'm in part 141, we have stage checks. On my stage 3 check, I was performing some ground-based maneuvers, and I could not figure out the winds. I just couldn't figure out, the winds were changing. I couldn't figure out which direction they were coming from. So I'm sitting here with this chief pilot, and he's getting frustrated. He's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you not getting? And I was like, I can't figure out where the winds are coming from. And he told me there was a little pond next to us. And he said, look at that pond. You see how there's riffles on one side and not the other side? He said, because the wind's coming over the bank, not hitting that water, but hitting the other water as it sinks, and it's causing riffles. So you know that the wind direction is coming from the direction of the water that's still. And it's little things like that people know about aviation that I want to know. I want to know how to be able to look at the water and tell which direction the wind's going. And I think those are the little secrets that people like me don't get, because I have a PFD that tells me which direction the wind's coming from, right? And I think that, tell me your secrets. Tell me the stuff that you knew before automation came about that you used every single day. That way, if my automation fails, I can use that. And then I think the second thing is, when you get old and when you've made it, when you get to your retirement age, don't go to the golf course as much. Come to my school and tell me what you learned in your aviation industry, right? Give back. The aviation industry is very good about giving back while they're in the industry. But I think we need people like yourselves is when you retire and, you're sitting on the rocking chair at the beach, take a time a little bit to come and reinvest into the industry that gave you so much and that you gave so much to. Come, somebody like yourself could come and we could organize a meeting here at the university. I could get you 30 young aviation students and you could present on whatever you wanted to, right? And it's like, I can set up those events with my students, but I think it's harder to find the right people who are willing and able to come out and do those things from the older industry. So those are the two things, right? Don't just retire and forget about us. And then tell me your secrets. Those would be the two things that I wanted from the older generation.
Thanks for that, Brandon. And here's the first secret. When you retire, you're not golfing and sitting on the beach. I've got a ranch and I work first of all, I'm not retired. And secondly, even if I was, I don't get as much time to golf as I certainly want to. Secondly, if that was an invitation, I'll absolutely commit to doing that. Here's the thing. We've got actually a poster, a slide that says, beware the guru. Right? Not everybody that comes and gives you their wisdom is good stuff for you. And I'm not saying that I am or I am not. It's just that it can get very confusing when the secret stuff, yeah, there's a lot of little things, look for a smokestack. Which way is the smoke blowing? Just 100 things I give you on that one. But the last thing there is that there's a lot of things people will tell you. Don't accept any of them as gospel, because there's no truth like a self-discovered truth. If I gave you an idea, a tip or technique, and you go and say, it doesn't work for me, shit can it, man, throw it out. And yet you might find it and modify it a little bit this way, that way. And when you do, and you prove it to yourself, that's when it sticks in your long-term memory, right? So no truth like a self-discovered one. I think getting the wisdom out of the people that have it is important, but it's also important to realize not everybody has it. I hear an awful lot of senior aviators telling young people, you don't know how bad it is, right? You think you're getting into something that you're going to love, and you're not. I hear that a lot from my generation to your generation. And that's just despicable, right? And basically they're jealous. We all wish, well, maybe not all of us, but many of us wish that we were in your shoes right now, starting out with the new technologies and at the beginning of our career. And you know why we feel that way? Because we've had a pretty good run ourselves, right? Not with all the advantages that your generation have. But at any rate, I think we've just kind of touched the surface on a lot of these things. I think more than ever, what I've learned from this is that, there are differences in generations, but the more you address people and learn from people as individuals, the more you realize there's more common ground than differences. So, Brandon, I'll give you the last word here before we close it out. Anything you would like to tell the vast audience of the Only Human podcast?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think this is a great first step in handling some of these generational differences, is just having people like me and you have conversations like this. And then I have to shout out Anna Leone. She's our event coordinator for the MSA. She does a wonderful job, and she asked me to, and I told her I would. So shout out to Anna Leone.
Well, excellent. Thanks, Angela, so much. And maybe we'll have her on. For all of you, thank you for joining us on this one. We're going to continue a discussion on a lot of things that relate to this, specifically how technology is changing the way we think. Brandon, one of the things we didn't get a chance to talk a lot about was how do you develop critical thinking when it hasn't been developed in you at an early age. And there's some real interesting science on that. Here's the short version. It's really hard, really hard. You either imprint that at those critical ages, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or you have to overlay it. And when you overlay it, it's really hard to do. So we'll talk about that some more in a coming podcast. I want to wrap this up by saying thanks to Brandon for this. I want to remind everybody that we're going to get back to our best books series here pretty quick, and we're going to have a couple more guests over the next few weeks. So please remember to tune back in. In the meantime, keep growing where you are with the resources at hand, and I will see you soon.